This is David Brooks, the Cadillac Counselor, coming at you to tell you a piece of my mind. And today I have Tom Newmark with us, and he is going to bring a perspective mainly focusing on the Policy 443. Now, look, we have about a year left before the major elections come in 2026 for the Board of Education. It's been a part of my whole thing is to get people knowledgeable so that they can vote correctly. Our children need the vote. Our parents need the vote. Administration, staff, everybody is looking at health. And so for me, I'm all about let's get the information out. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be on your show. And David, I just love what you do for the public. It's just providing perspectives, just putting the information out there, and like we were talking earlier, letting other people decide, right? So I think that's great.
I saw the document that you sent to me, and I want you to kind of explain to the people your ideas around the policy 443. If you want to kind of tell the history about it, and then kind of where we are now, and then what you would like to propose.
Yeah, thank you so much. So about 7, 8 years ago, they passed a policy called Policy 443 that was intended with the best of intentions. I'm glad they actually did this policy to try to support kids that believe they were transgender. They identified as transgender or they were gender nonconforming. So I think it started with the best of intentions. There wasn't as much information scientifically available at that time as there is now. And so, what I've been proposing is that we update the policy to bring us in line with all the research that has been done in the 7 years or 8 years since the policy was first passed. So, what makes the policy so controversial is really four things. One, the sports currently allow boys to play in girls' sports, which, in my view, and a lot of people's view, is unfair to women. With regard to student privacy, they don't maintain sex segregated spaces. So you can, as a boy or a girl, change in the opposite bathroom, locker room, on overnight stays. You can even stay with someone of opposite biological sex. It's all based on gender identity being an internal feeling of how masculine or feminine you are. Some people genuinely feel that even though they're biologically a boy, they feel like they're a woman or vice versa. And so they're basing their policy off that feeling. And then the other two are parental rights and curriculum. So for parental rights, the policy allows for students to be transitioned at school with support of the school staff, but to not notify parents. So by transition, I mean you can have a new name, new pronouns, new bathrooms, new sports teams. You can basically, if you're male, for example, live as a woman at school, live as a female at school, but your parents wouldn't know. If you, as a student, decide you don't want to tell your parents, the local government here, the school system, they're legally part of the local government, will keep that secret from parents. They will collude with the kid to keep that a secret. And that could make sense if we were limiting this to parents that might present a risk to the child, that were abusive, if they knew that their child felt this way and they were not going to handle it appropriately. I think we could justify keeping that a secret. But there's no differentiation between parents who are loving and just the kid doesn't want to tell them, and parents that actually pose a risk. And that's the challenge. And then the last one is just what we're teaching about gender identity. So Maryland has produced a comprehensive support framework for this, a health curriculum framework for this, that is requiring even in kindergarten that we teach about gender identity, which many people, including myself, think that's kind of early and can be very confusing. It's very confusing because kids have there's a developmental milestone in child psychology called gender constancy. So it's the idea that whether you're a boy or a girl isn't based on the clothes you wear. And so most kids by age somewhere between 5 and 8, depending on whether the kids have autism or not, can develop this sense of gender constancy. So a 3-year-old may have the idea that, oh, well, my brother put on a dress and now he's a girl. And they just think he is based on the clothes. But you eventually develop what's called gender constancy. So it is developmentally inappropriate, in my view, to teach that at the young ages, for sure. But even at the older ages, if we're going to teach something controversial like that, we really need to present both sides and say, well, some people believe in gender identity, and that is your quote unquote true gender. There are people that genuinely believe that. For most of human history, we just have based it on the reproductive anatomy that a person has, and that's whether you're male or female. So they're two different belief systems. So if we're going to get into that, we need to present both sides fairly and present the science. So those have been my concerns in those four areas. And unfortunately, the new revisions that came out, so this has been very controversial, didn't really address those issues, those core four issues, in any substantive way. They made some changes, some qualifications, but they got a lot of things wrong.
Now, what were the changes that the FCPS made in the
Yeah.
policy 443?
Absolutely. So first thing that they made, which was a good change, is the clinical term for any person that feels uncomfortable with their biological sex and feels like they want to be the other sex. They have an internal sense of this. Is called gender dysphoria. It's on page 511 of the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic and statistical manual that all psychologists use as kind of the reference guide for all the different conditions that can go on with we humans. We're complicated creatures. So there's a big long list. It's a big book. And one of those, there's an entire chapter on something called gender dysphoria. In the original policy, and still today, because it hasn't been revised yet, FCPS reference what they call gender identity. They never make a clinical reference to gender dysphoria, which is the accepted scientific term. So the first good thing that they proposed in this new revision is they're actually making a reference to gender dysphoria, the actual clinically accepted term, which I think is great. That was very much needed. So the overall, these revisions, I'll just start with this framing. There's a weird mix, an odd mix of like clinical language that's accurate or somewhat accurate with more activist language, and I'll get into that. So they start out strong. They say, look, this is going to deal with gender dysphoria. That's what this policy is about, and also people that are gender nonconforming. Maybe they're a masculine girl or a feminine boy, and I'm totally fine with that. I think that's great to say that it's fine that people have differences in that way. So that was great. But then, even though they reference gender dysphoria in the very first 2 or 3 sentences, they never require a diagnosis of gender dysphoria to engage in any sort of treatment. They never require parental permission to engage in any sort of treatment. And parental rights are never clearly established in the later parts of the policy. So they start out strong. First sentence or two, great. Oh, you're referencing the actual science. You're trying to be objective. I love it. But then they don't really follow through in the rest of the policy. One of the things they do is they did provide a good summary of what gender dysphoria is, because they did not even use that term in the last policy. But they did not reference the DSM-5 official definition, so I encourage them to do that. They used to say, when they defined gender identity, that gender identity is largely innate and inflexible. So it's basically something that's almost permanent. That's not what the research actually says. So typically, these kids were males age 7 or below that got gender dysphoria. And most of them, when they went through puberty, that without therapy, just growing up, without therapy, without any treatment, without any drugs, without anything, they just identified, became comfortable with their biological sex. The vast majority of them did. This is historically a very rare condition. About 1 in 10,000 people would get it. And if you take like the size of our school system, which is 50,000, this is how the numbers would typically run historically. Out of 50,000 kids, you'd have a total of 5 kids, mostly almost all young males who got it, age 7 or below. Almost all those kids would end up gay or bisexual and not transgender. One would end up straight. So that's how, after puberty. So that's how it would go. So that's the exact opposite of the original claim, where they said it's largely innate and inflexible. Well, it may be innate, but it naturally, kids kind of grow out of it. There's something happens with puberty in the brain, the chemistry, we don't know exactly, but as kids go through puberty, most of them end up gay or bisexual. They do not identify as transgender after that. And so that was one of the challenges that they removed. They removed that inaccurate language, but they didn't go the other step and say, well, okay, in most cases, these kids end up gay or bisexual. There's no reference with the fact that most kids are going to become comfortable. And that's very important, even though that's in the definition section. If you understand that, then that changes your policy. Because if most kids, without any therapy, without any drugs, without anything, are simply going to be comfortable gay and lesbian students, well, maybe we ought to let nature take its course instead of, immediately saying, well, you're 7, you feel really feminine, we're going to affirm you as a girl, even though you're a biological boy. So that's what I'd like to see change there.
I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here. All right.
Yeah.
If someone was transgender, all right,
Right.
and they wanted to play a sport,
Mm.
I think it was like create a different lane per se for people who are consider themselves to be male, people that are considered themselves to be born male, still male, born
Right.
female, still female, but have a transgender section or
Right.
lane. All right. What if, and I'm just saying, for them mentally, what if there was nobody to compete against? What if they were kind of on their own and there was only like 2 transgenders in the district? How would that play out?
Yeah, and I offer 2 options. So one was a different league, and to your point, the challenge with that is, can you get enough people with 1 in 72 kids identifying as transgender, can you actually make that feasible? And that's the challenge with that. My primary position was, that was actually the secondary option. The primary one is, why don't we have the males that identify as transgender, if they want to still compete in the male league, but dress in a feminine fashion, maybe give them a female uniform, they could still express themselves, how they feel about themselves, but also be in the league that corresponds to their biology, and same for the girls. So that was what I thought would be a reasonable compromise there. Again, I'm open to the idea, certainly, of a transgender league, but the feasibility of that is going to be a challenge, because I don't know that you'd have enough athletes in there. And so what I actually view it positively. Like, if someone feels they're transgender, and let's say they're a biological male, let's work on the acceptance of that person on that team with the other males and say, look, this person feels differently. Here's an opportunity for us to understand this person feels differently. They're on this team because they're biologically male, but they identify otherwise. That seems like it'd be an opportunity for more social acceptance if we did it there. And same for the female teams. So it's not that I really want to separate folks. My primary goal would be to have the males, regardless of how you identify, be in the same team, and to work on any issues with the other males on the team to say, yeah, he's a he biologically, but he goes by a different name. He dresses femininely. Let's be accepting of that. His parents have approved, right? This is from the liability perspective. Let's work on that as a grounds for acceptance. I think that would be better than, if you're the guy that goes to the female team and you're 6'2" and you identify as feminine. It's just not fair to the girls, and it's not safe. The height difference is typically there, the bone density, the lung capacity, and just the presence of testosterone that builds the muscles so much more differently on a male. That's just not a great place for females to be. So, in particular, the issue is the males playing on the females team. I have less concerns about the females who want to play on the male team because they identify. They also are putting themselves at a safety risk if they want to do that. And I think there are a lot of males that would not feel comfortable competing with them because they don't want to hurt someone. So I'm concerned about them voluntarily putting themselves at risk. It's more the issue, though, is when a male wants to go onto a female team and the females are like, this is unfair to us. That's where the primary issue occurs. And then I'll go into the informing parents section. So section D.B and D.C, they did add language to say that, when doing so does not place the student at risk of child abuse, they will notify the student's parent. That's great. That's what we've been asking for 2 years. They don't define what it means to be at risk of child abuse. I wish they would define that more. How did they determine that exactly? But then the section that comes right after that says, well, students can share personal information at a time and place of their choosing. I get that, but the way it's written, it's establishing a privacy right of kids against their parents and being able to talk to staff members and staff members keeping indefinitely that secret from parents. If you could put a time limit on it and say, if we're trying to help the kid, tell the parents, maybe we give them a week or something, right? There's compromises we can make here, but at some point the parents need to be notified that, hey, your child's experiencing this concern. They did express it to me as a teacher or the counselor, and we know you to be a loving parent. We just want to let you know your child's concerned. They don't feel, female or male or whatever the issue is. So that section, unfortunately, kind of undoes the other good work that they did, which says, oh, we're going to notify parents. We're making that more explicit. And like the next paragraph down says, well, but the kids can decide. So it's not clear language. They did recognize in this version that you should not, as a student or a staff member, be required to refer to someone else as their preferred pronouns. They're encouraging it, and I have no problem calling people by what they want to be called. But if your religious beliefs or your philosophical beliefs, or if you're like me and I'll talk to adults all day long as their preferred pronouns. But you've got a kid that's 10, they're in the process of development. I ethically just don't think that's the right thing to do. And I couldn't, in good conscience, call a child by something opposite than their biological sex, because I know it's not a neutral act of respect. That's what the CAST report found. They found that that has to be regarded as an active intervention. It's a psychological treatment, and you're engaging that. Even though your intentions may be just to respect what the person wants to be called, you're actually reinforcing that for them. So even though most of these kids, again, grow up to be happy gay and bisexual folks, what is happening when you refer to them as, you're actually influencing the identity outcomes. And so what I'm asking the schools to do is just be neutral and supportive, make sure that whatever the kids are going through, they get their right counseling and support, but don't affirm from them, oh yes, you really are a girl in some sense because you're feminine. That really is your true identity. Schools should just say, look, if parents want to go and write a note, and I think they should, if they believe in this and they want to have their kid live as the opposite gender, just write a note to the school system and say, hey, I'm requesting that you refer to my kid by these pronouns, these new names. That gets all the liability out of the teachers in the school system. It's a huge liability to the school system if they're going to do this secretly. So let's just make it explicit, do what the parents want. And again, not require other students to refer to students as pronouns they may disagree with philosophically, religiously, or in my case, scientifically. Other things, they're currently keeping records of kids that have these pronoun changes, but they're secret records that parents can't get to. And so what I'm saying is, let's make sure that we make these transparent and have parents put in a notice saying, yes, I approve to call Johnny Susie like this. We've talked to a therapist. We think this is the right thing. And that's fine. If the parents are on board with it, the school should just support it. But if the parents aren't on board with it, the school should support that too. There are lots of cases where parents, even my friend January Littlejohn, who's a licensed mental counselor in Florida, they transitioned her child against her will. And here you have a licensed counselor who knows about these things, much like you, and saying, I don't think this is really what my child is experiencing. I don't think they're really transgender. I think it's something else. And that ultimately was proven to be the case. And, the school wanted to go a different direction, even against a parent who had a background knowledge in this area. So we just need to make sure that parents get to seek the counseling they want and act in accordance with their beliefs. Again, the rest of it, I think we already covered. It was the facilities, the sports, the overnight trips, and the training. We want to make sure that the training is objective. So Frederick County Public Schools actually hired the Frederick Center. And I like the Frederick Center. I have nothing against the Frederick Center. I think they provide great support for folks that are LGBTQ. They provide socialization. But they have in recent years become really interested in this idea of what some call gender ideology, or this belief that you can be born in the wrong body. And they've been very strong advocates for pushing those beliefs into our schools and teaching that to kids. They actually were the ones that were called in to train our staff at Frederick County Public Schools. And I suggested, well, could we actually provide another group to our staff to get at least two perspectives on this? Because there is the group that's pursuing a more scientifically based group. One's called GenSpec, which I've written for. There's other folks like Dr. Stephen Levine, who's very well known, and he's been a court court-recognized expert in the area of gender medicine. He's a psychology professor. There's folks like the guy that oversaw the chapter on gender dysphoria in the DSM, Dr. Ken Zucker. He could come and present a more balanced view. I'd like those folks to be heard from our staff, but my suggestion was rejected to bring anyone else in other than the folks that see it from a certain point of view.
What is causing you guys not to come to a workability where you guys can work together to create a language for, I guess, both sides to be? Is there any way to compromise this on one way or the other? Yeah, please explain to me how that could work.
I think so, and that's what I've always sought. So, a couple of years ago, I wrote a policy. I called it Policy 445. So I added a couple digits to the number there instead of Policy 443, and I tried to create a balanced and more neutral policy that would support everybody. If you want to transition your kids, you're allowed to. If you didn't, you're allowed to not. Right, which is a difference from the current policy that says, "Hey, we'll do it behind your back." That to me is unfair, and providing alternatives for bathrooms, etc. So when I did that, and I worked with a bunch of people, it wasn't just me. I had PhD, doctors, psychologists, medical professionals, educators review it, went through many revisions, and it's now been published in multiple languages. It's been published here in Frederick as a Frederick version, and there's a version for the whole US. There's a version in different countries. So it's just trying to be fair to everybody. The reason why I think that we can't get there is part of it's a lack of communication. And honestly, I've been reaching out to everyone who disagree with me because they want to label you as something awful for disagreeing with them. For example, Peter Brem from the Frederick Center, I'll just call him out. He said this publicly. I have nothing against the man. But when I proposed the policy, he came to a Board of Education meeting and said, these are people that have always supported, conversion therapy. I'm not getting the quote exact right, but he basically accused us of, wanting conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is this horrible and discredited approach that provides electric shocks to gay and lesbian people to try to change their sexual orientation. And that's a horrible practice. It's discredited. Nobody should do it. In the policy I proposed, I specifically, and all the authors there, we all worked together on this, said this is a horrible practice. Nobody should ever do it. Even if the parent wants it done, there's no way this is going to happen, right? Never do this conversion therapy. So I heard him come and say, in response to this policy that explicitly said, never do this, he said, will you guys support it? I wrote to him and I said, sir, it says it on I think it's on page 6 of the policy. We should never do this. This is horrible. Could you please correct your statement? Could I please meet with you? My concern from the beginning has been this largely affects gay and lesbian autistic kids that mistakenly believe they're transgender, and they go through a transition, and some of them find out, oh, this wasn't for me. This is a bad idea. This idea of transitioning minors has only been around for the last 10 years. And so I went to meet with him. I wanted to meet with him. He refused. I reached out to so many people on the other side. I hate to talk about it as sides, but so many people have a different view, saying, look, could we break some bread over this? So we make some peace? I really want to explain to you what I'm trying to do here. I'm really concerned about the impact on gay and lesbian people specifically, as well as autistic folks. And there has been no interest in that. And not only that, but folks from PFLAG have come and defamed me multiple times at the Board of Education meeting, saying I was a horrible, hateful person. But if I'm a horrible, hateful person, I'm going and trying to break bread with you and call and asking to privately meet with you to make sure we understand each other properly. And I think that's what's happening in our country now. People are not talking to each other, and they're getting into the little Republican corner or Democratic corner, or pro-trans corner, or pro-policy 443 and anti-policy 443. I think we need to just talk a lot more, because I think most of what I'm saying would actually be pretty agreeable to the vast majority of people.
The elections are about a year away. All right. Some of the candidates have not. I've heard some kind of whispers about some people coming up. They haven't really put their name in the hat yet. But I know that this is nonpartisan. All right. It's not just anything to do with the school. Shouldn't be a Democratic thing. It shouldn't be a Republican situation. And
Right.
I know that the gender conversations, sex conversations, they tend to fall on each side. So this is my last question.
Yeah.
How do you think the election is going to be in this particular race when it comes down to voting for different topics and different situations? What do you see is going how this is going to play out?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really intense as an election. Last time the teachers union spent $55,000 here, and folks on the other side raised record numbers as well. I was obviously involved with one of the candidates, Jamie Brennan, and I think it's going to be an intense race. I think this issue, I wish this weren't, I don't think it is going to be the biggest issue in the campaign, honestly. I think it's going to be an issue in the campaign. I think that academics, that where we have 75% of the kids failing algebra, I think that's a huge issue. I think that spending is going to be a huge issue. I think the blueprint is the biggest issue in the state where we're spending billions of dollars more and we're just not getting the results. I think that's going to be pretty significant. But with regard to this, like it is a divisive issue. I hate that it is. I'm trying to pursue it as a clinical approach, a more objective approach. I think candidates are going to break down according to this issue for the most part. I think you're going to have, I mean, there's three that are very clearly in favor of policy 443 and have stated so publicly. And then you have folks that are more in the middle, like David Migdal. And then you have folks that are on the other side. I do think there's a middle ground that can be pursued. I think, we know that about 79% of the public agrees that boys should not play in female sports. They agree that that's not fair. And that's across Republicans and Democrats. That's a Gallup poll that's come out a couple times on this. The numbers have only increased. It used to be lower than that. So I feel like on that one, with almost 80% of the public agreeing that that's an unfair situation, I would hope that every candidate would seek to modify policy 443 to reflect what most of the public wants. Even here in Frederick, we'll see if that happens. It's unfortunately a very partisan time, and I'm not holding out hope for the civility and the statesmanlike conduct that I've been asking folks to engage in.
Well, listen, I'll tell you this. This is the beginning of the 2026 BOE series. For the last two elections, I've given everyone a platform to be able to express their feelings. It's not a debate. I don't go into try to create controversial topics, but what I do allow is that each individual can express their thoughts. And for the public, if anybody has a different opinion, I would love to interview the representative for the Frederick Center so that I can get his perspective. What I want is that every candidate get a voice, and every candidate has their ability to say whatever they want, like the public to know. And from there, I just want to be that avenue. So if anybody's out there, please subscribe, follow, because you are going to get a lot of information. And like I said, I'm not running from anybody. If you call me and you want and send me a message, I want your voice to be heard because it's about the kids, about the parents and the staff, and that's all that we are here for. So, Tom, thank you very much for starting the series off, and I really appreciate what you are doing in the community to get a perspective out there.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been great, and thank you for your work. I love watching your show, and I hope everybody tunes in. So definitely tune in for this. Honestly, you're the place to get the best information on Board of Ed of anywhere in the county. So I think folks should really focus in on your show to get that objective information.
Very good. Well, you take it easy, and we'll be in touch throughout the year. I know that I always pick your brain to kind of see what's going on to get a good litmus test. I got a couple people out there that definitely give me good feedback, and I'll tell you this: whatever it is, keep doing good work because the children need it. You got
I,
me?
I got you. I totally agree. Thanks, David. This has been great.
All right, it's the
Peace.
Cadillac counselor coming at you, telling you a piece of my mind. Take it easy. Bye.